Marv Tollman came to Hollywood as a young man in the 1960s, determined to become a famous movie star, failed miserably, and then ended up becoming wildly famous as the self-help failure guru to the stars. Marv's message was simple. We have a real you and a faux you.
Never takes a day off.
He taught everyone to get in touch with their real you by saying, F you, faux you.
F you, faux you.
Then, at the height of his career, he vanished into thin air. Naturally, there were many theories about what happened to him, but they all led nowhere, like this one involving the Soviet Union.
Reports of Marv Tollman sending secret messages to the Kremlin through his failure and success theories and then being murdered by the CIA were debunked today by the agency's director, William Colby. Colby's brief statement read, "The only secret messages Marv Tollman is sending are the ones to my wife, who won't stop badgering me to get in touch with my real self. To that I say, F you, Marv Tollman, F you."
There had been whispers that Marv was not a real self-help guru, that he was an actor playing a part. But that idea was quashed most vociferously by his former acting teacher, Sterling Meltzer.
Marv was not that good of an actor to pull off the role of a self-help guru. He had an air of desperation around him. And an inordinate amount of perspiration. I never saw an actor sweat that much. He was the only student in my class who carried a change of clothes and a squeegee.
No one had a clue as to what happened to Marv. Then, an investigative reporter named Harry Kelton began writing articles that started peeling away some of the layers of secrecy that surrounded his meteoric rise to success. Once Harry started making headway, he was murdered. It was another unsolved mystery. Prior to his untimely demise, Harry, against the advice of others, went to Italy in search of Marv's wife, Silvana, or rather, who everyone thought was his wife. He felt that if he could speak with her directly, she might be able to shed light on the situation. But when he arrived in the small Tuscan town of Suburban, he hit a wall.
I asked the local to help me find out where she was. Everyone seemed nervous, like they had something to hide. Then I took each one out for drinks to get them to open up. Some told me that Silvana was never married to Marv. Others said that she was married to Marv, but was having affairs. They based this on the various people they saw coming in and out of Silvana's apartment at all hours of the day and night.
Then something strange happened. All the people that Harry talked with in that small Tuscan village mysteriously died. Each one's death involved a different animal. One was scratched by a cat that had poison on its claws. One was bitten by a dog with rabies. Another was pecked to death by a chicken. And the last one was sat on by a cow. The four animals Silvana had written about in her children's book series, or rather, the books everyone thought she wrote. Turns out they were written by a woman named Lella Pancetta, who died several years earlier.
This was big news. I mean, if Silvana had lied about being the author of those children's books, and she was not married to Marv, then there might be other things she lied about. Did she have anything to do with Marv and his book? Was she part of a scheme to present Marv as a self-help guru? The questions were endless, and I had to get the answers.
It was at this time that Harry started to receive threatening letters to stop what he was doing. But he didn't take the threats seriously because the letters were poorly written. They spelled decapitate with 3 P's and used the word implied when they meant inferred. But the threats were indeed real, as Harry soon came to realize.
On my way home every night, I was followed by a black sedan. I moved apartments several times, but it didn't help. Neither did moving in with my girlfriend. She broke up with me, and I moved into the Roosevelt Hotel, which threw whoever was following me off the scent.
Until it didn't. 1 month later, Harry was dead. And while no one knows who was following him in the black sedan, the authorities did find a potential murder suspect, according to Hollywood historian Gerald Corman.
The suspect was a chambermaid at the Roosevelt Hotel by the name of Elsa Davenport, who was a former lover of Marv's. Many believe she killed Harry to stop him from casting aspersions on the man she claimed was her self-help sex guru. But she had a rock-solid alibi. The night of the murder, she was sitting in the front row at the Hollywood Bowl for the opening night of a musical based on the career of Alvin and the Chipmunks. Elsa had all their records and was president of their fan club.
Harry Kelton's articles jump-started interest in the Marv Tollman case. His unsolved murder put it into overdrive, which is at the heart of Part 2 of the 3-part series, Marv Tollman, Look Back in Failure. The disappearance of Marv Tollman took place over a year before the murder of Harry Kelton and was no longer a news story or even a topic of discussion. But the investigative journalist's murder changed all that. It created a new wave of interest in what happened to the self-help failure guru to the stars. Hollywood historian Gerald Corman elaborates.
So dozens of books have been written on the subject. Most are rather thin and never did more than rehash the usual tropes like Marv was hired to be a self-help guru to the stars by the FBI, directed by Richard Nixon, to get the inside dirt on celebrities protesting the Vietnam War. Ironically, Marv secretly worked with Nixon shortly before he resigned in 1974. And while no one knows what they discussed, we do know from the Watergate tapes what the disgraced president thought of Marv.
That Jew bastard Tollman kept repeating, "Be the real you. Be the real you." Well, I've always been the real me, and that's why my ass is in a goddamn sling.
But there were a few books that really dug deep into what might have happened. In particular, there was Marv Tollman, Self-Delusional Self-Help Guru to the Stars, written by another investigative journalist, Doyle Lonergan of the Irish Times, who made the rounds of the talk show circuit with his theory that Marv was involved with the Mafia.
Doyle, your book explains that Marv had a gambling problem and was in debt to the Mafia, who threatened to kill him if he didn't pay them back, so he became a self-help guru, but only temporarily. Did I get that right?
Well, his plan was to make enough money to pay them back and then quit. But he couldn't quit. Marv was being blackmailed by Julian Glustrom, who he worked with at the Italian restaurant in Hollywood while they were both struggling actors. Turns out Julian had an idea for a book about failure and success, which Marv, quote-unquote, borrowed. So, in addition to the Mafia, Marv was paying hush money to Julian Glustrom.
As I understand it, your theory is that Marv finally had enough and wanted to quit so he wouldn't have to pay Julian anymore. And when Julian found out, he had Marv killed.
He tried to have Marv killed. Marv had lied and told Julian he was taking a hiatus and that he would be back working in a month. Julian didn't believe him and planned to hire a hitman to kill Marv, but it never happened. Julian was found dead in the oversized fish tank in his house. It contained more than 200 guppies. He was a total guppy freak.
Well, I've heard Hollywood is calling with a movie deal. What do you say to that?
I don't give a damn about Hollywood. I don't care about any of that. I care about the truth.
2 weeks later, Doyle Lonergan signed a $2 million movie deal for the rights to Marv Tollman's Self-Delusional Self-Help Guru to the Stars. 2 weeks after that, he was found dead in the woods near his home, the victim of a massive raccoon attack. As for the movie, it was never made. Hollywood historian Gerald Corman explains.
The movie was never made because the book was completely fabricated. Turns out Doyle Lonergan was the one with huge gambling debts, not Marv. And he thought the only way to make that kind of money was to cash in on the "what happened to Marv Tollman" frenzy. His murder was never solved, but it did make the Guinness Book of World Records for the most raccoons involved in a human death 26.
Julian Glustrom's murder was also an unsolved mystery. What wasn't a mystery was that he never had an idea for a book about failure and success. It was Marv's idea all along. So there were never any hush money payments. But Julian did hire a hitman to kill Marv. Many believed it was because Marv was having an affair with his wife, Estelle. She corrected the record.
To tell you the truth, I had that affair with Marv because Julian never showed me any affection. He was more interested in those guppies than me. Oh, God, I hated those guppies. Always glaring at me with those beady little eyes. But, it wasn't the affair that made him want to kill Marv. He was jealous of Marv's success. And as for finding a hitman, he didn't have to look any further than the Italian restaurant where he and Marv worked. The place was crawling with them. Oh, each one more beady-eyed than the next. Just like those goddamn guppies.
Marv Tollman was not murdered by the Mafia for unpaid gambling debts, or by a former co-worker for delinquent hush money, or, as it turned out, professional jealousy. However, this did not stop the flood of Mafia-related and rumor-filled books from being published, nor did it prevent a slew of equally preposterous plays from being produced. One of the worst was Marv Tollman, an offer he couldn't refuse.
Godfather, I need a favor.
You come to me on the day of my daughter's bat mitzvah and ask me for a favor. What chutzpah! You never invited me over to your house for a cup of coffee, not even a lousy Pop-Tart.
But Godfather...
I love Pop-Tarts, especially the kosher blueberry ones.
But Godfather, I've written this book, and I need some money to get it published.
All right, let me see it. Well, real success begins with the real you. It sounds mashugana, but self-help books, they're very popular. Okay, I'll give you the money, on one condition. If you don't pay me back, you'll be swimming with the gefilte fishes.
The show was a disaster and closed after 1 week. A week after that, the author of the play, Harvey Kosnin, was found dead in his car. An autopsy uncovered an excessive amount of blueberry Pop-Tarts in his system. Because of that, many believed it was the mob that killed him, but not Cynthia Sinclair, the play's director.
The Mafia had nothing to do with Harvey's death. He was obsessed with blueberry Pop-Tarts. Yeah, when he was a kid, his mother never let him eat them. As an adult, he bought thousands of boxes of them, but never opened them out of guilt. When the show closed, he was so depressed that he lost control and devoured every single blueberry Pop-Tart, all 16,000 of them. They really should put a warning on the package now. Caution, not for failed playwrights with mother issues.
There were many more theories about Marv Tollman being involved with the Mafia, but none of them could be proved. And even if he had been involved with the Mafia, no one had any insight into why they would have murdered him. So the situation remained the same. Marv Tollman vanished into thin air, and no one had a single clue as to why. Though the theories didn't stop coming, as Hollywood historian Gerald Corman recounts.
Once the Mafia connection stories went away, there was a deluge of truly bizarre ideas that made their way into print and onto the stage and even onto the silver screen. There was one documentary that pushed the credibility envelope to the max. The premise was that Marv was kidnapped by several players from a Venezuelan soccer team. The team had lost a record 432 games in a row and was desperate for someone who could turn them around.
The Caracas corn tortillas were the laughingstock of the Venezuelan Soccer Association for years. Everyone agreed that something drastic needed to be done, except for team owner Esteban Madrigal.
I was against the idea of kidnapping Marv Tollman. Number one, I had no idea who he was. And number two, we had no money to fund the kidnapping plot. But the players felt that bringing in someone like Tollman, with his positive attitude and snappy sayings, would help. So they held many bake sales to raise the money for airfare to America and for the kidnapping supplies. While the kidnapping was successful, the result was not. We lost another 22 games in a row. After being fired, Marv stayed on with the team, taking over the stadium's chimichanga concession.
A quick trip to the Corn Tortillas Stadium proved that Marv was not running the chimichanga concession. Eventually, the public grew tired of these oddball tales of Marv Tollman's disappearance. They accepted the fact that the man who once uplifted them was no longer in their life, and that allowed them to move on. It also made room for more entertaining projects that focused on the positive aspects of what Marv Tollman meant to millions. One of the most beloved was the hit Broadway musical Guru.
Oh, Mary, I want to be successful and famous.
Listen, Larry. Success built on fame will collapse like a house of cards. Success built on the real you will outlast the pyramids.
Where did you get that from? A fortune cookie?
No. Marv Tollman.
Marv who?
Here's the thing about Marv. Without his advice, your soul will starve. Listen to the guru and be the real you. And if you don't, you'll be in deep doo-doo.
And then things changed. A new theory about Marv's disappearance seemingly came out of left field, and it was captivating the nation once again. What wasn't new was that it involved the Mafia. It was put forward by a Harvard history professor, Sidney P.J. Hollister, who had posited that there were many similarities between Marv's disappearance and the assassination of President Kennedy.
The Mafia did murder Marv, but not because he was involved with them in any way. They did it because Marv was in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. And he was there that day because he was having lunch with a good friend who worked at the Texas School Book Depository. And that friend was Lee Harvey Oswald.
Totally innocent about what his friend was purportedly up to, Marv bought the sandwiches and planned to meet Oswald on the grassy knoll. Of course, Oswald never showed up.
After hearing that Oswald was arrested for the murder of the president, Marv was shocked. Shock turned to anger when he realized that he would never recoup the $3.87 he was out for his friend's sandwich chips and a bottle of Dad's root beer.
According to Professor Hollister, Marv spent 2 sleepless nights worrying that he would never get repaid. Finally, he got up the nerve to visit Oswald's widow to seek restitution. Marina Oswald recounted this story years later for a family history project.
I explained to Marv that Lee was set up by Mafia to kill Kennedy, and he was bumped off by Jack Ruby to keep him from talking. I tell Marv he will be killed too if he don't keep quiet. Then he asked me for his $3.87. Sadly, he didn't have receipt, so I tell him, sorry, niet can do.
Professor Hollister was convinced that Marv didn't keep quiet and in turn was murdered by the Mafia. What made this unbelievable theory even more unbelievable is who the professor ended up in a relationship with and then marrying. It was none other than Silvana Di Soldi. We'll delve into those issues in greater detail in the 3rd and final episode of Marv Tollman, Look Back in Failure.